so welcome to the virtual attendees as well. And I'm going to let the folks in the room get settled in for a second. But so that you know, if you want to take part in the poll everywhere, we have a question that's going to come up for you. So you can do it on your cell phone or you can do it on your computer, either way. You can type in what's on the screen there.
I think we should go ahead and go to the next slide, because this is a kind of a springboard into what we're going to get into today. So we're looking at e-learning course essentials. And so the question I'm going to ask you to take a moment to respond to is, what are the major staples of any course, not just an online course, but online, face-to-face, hybrid, iFlex, whatever kind of course it is, that help to promote learning and minimize distractions. So if you can think about the courses you've taught in the past or maybe taken in the past, I think that could be a good reflection piece. Think about the courses you've taught or taken, and what are those pieces that help to minimize the confusion, help the navigation, and had a good learning experience, an effective learning experience. You can respond, I believe, as many times as you want. It's a word cloud that's going to come up. It is cloudy.
Big cloudy.
Okay, these are cool. The tool that we're using right now is called Poll Everywhere. And it's easy to use in class because you can use it with your cell phone. If you want more information, we'll share that with you afterwards. This is a new.
So this word cloud makes the words bigger when they're said more. Mm-hmm. Clear is clearly mm-hmm. coming up as something that is important.
Awesome. I like this one. This is the first time I've used the cloud. This is kind of cool.
That's like a thing. There was a thing on Facebook that uses the same thing.
There's also a tool called Wordle that does something like this too, but this is really cool that you can do it in real time. So just to look at a few of these, we have seamlessly, I'll say clear, I'll try to pick out the big pieces, scaffolded, enthusiasm, and I'm assuming that's on the behalf of maybe the instructor and the students. Meeting, engaging, authentic, introducing materials, creative, that's probably authentic assessment. Calendar, involvement or instructor involvement. Okay, so these are some good pieces. Does anybody want to expound on any of the pieces? Maybe the words are broken up, and so I can't necessarily see where they come together. But anybody want to expound on some of the pieces? What do we mean here by scaffolded? Are you talking about the units or within the unit, or is it per unit? Anyone here do that? It may have been one of our online folks. Feedback, that's something we're going to talk about today. Somebody wrote Blackboard. Anyone in here? Any of our online people wrote Blackboard? Oh, that was you. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So it looks like a lot of communication stuff in here too, is what I'm seeing, and that would go back to clear and engaged, right? So if you're bringing clarity to the stuff, you're probably communicating really, really well. The syllabus is one of your major communication tools. I don't know if we think about it that way, but it really is. It tells your students that's your contract between you and the student. What's going to happen in the course.
Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. So my name is Allyson Hall, and I'm an instructional designer here.
And I'm Julie Golden. I'm the Associate Director of eLearning and Professional Development. And thank you for coming to our little get-together on e-course essentials. We're talking about navigating these an online course and the experience really for online students and faculty members, because it's a dual experience. We think a lot about what the students do, but it's a faculty and student shared experience. So we want to think about both of those today. Thank you to our online folks who are joining us as well. We have some folks here in the room, and we have some folks online, which we love. So we're going to be bouncing back and forth between face-to-face and virtual attendees.
This is an interactive session, so if you guys have questions during the session, feel free to ask them. It's a very intimate community here that we try to kind of make sure we keep going. So if you have any questions, you can go ahead and ask, and that's for our online people as well. The objectives for today's session, we're going to identify some components of effective course planning, and we are mainly focusing on e-course planning, but it does pull a lot from the face-to-face process that we often go through. We're also going to talk about various ways to ensure the navigability of our courses and an effective instructional delivery. And I know that's a really big term, and that's something that's been debated over and over again for years and years. But we're going to talk about how research is showing that online instruction is being delivered most effectively. And then we're going to reflect on ways to incorporate these essentials in our current or future courses. So hopefully we can get a dialogue going about how your current course building is happening, and if you're using any of these tools. I say that in a very general term, but any of these tools to help to guide you through the construction of your courses.
We'll do some practical application of it too, and we're going to ask you to interact with that as well, and the virtual folks will be interacting as well. So we want to build the community of knowledge here too. So what Allyson and I are going to be talking about today, we got this all from research-based. We went back and we read the journal articles. Who did studies on this? The student satisfaction studies that are out there. What do they think are the good tools and the ones that give them the best experience? So we'll be talking about that stuff, but we definitely want to bring the community into this and hear from you and what your students like and how you think this e-course essential comes out for you. So the first thing that we have up there is pacing and time management. And this is really, we're all just coming out of midterms and so the pace of the course is starting to get away from some students right now in my class. I can see that, where they're trying to run to catch up. And it's really, really important. I spent the whole weekend emailing and answering questions and helping people get caught up. And if you have that gap in there, that's when students start to freak out, right? Because they're already falling behind and they can't get in touch with you. So one of the things I think about the pacing and time management is making sure that they know the structure of your course, that it's really well communicated, what's due when, and all of that. So the students have a certain credit hour requirement. We want to make sure that we honor that for the online students. It's a little bit different for them than, they spend 3 hours in a classroom. What does that look like online? So we define that also in the syllabus as well. And we make sure, I think one of the big things that students want to know, especially online students, because they maybe have a different way of approaching their studies right now. They might have children at home, they might have a job, they might have 2 jobs, they might have things that they really are trying to fit this into their schedule. So you want to make sure that your assignments mean something to them, that they actually apply to what they're doing. They don't feel like busy work to the students. And part of that comes in with sharing that purpose of the instructional material. And, we work with faculty all the time and we ask them to, put their intentionality right in there and visible to the students to say this aligns with this objective. If we're trying to meet this objective, this is why we're doing this particular assignment. So that gives them a link between why am I doing this? What's this for? Right?
Absolutely. I have one faculty member who keeps very close in mind the credit hour requirement. So the provost message is kind of simplified, is that for every 1 credit hour or 1 hour in class they should have approximately 3 hours homework, so to speak. So that's a very general estimate. So typically a 3 credit hour class would be about 9 hours, maybe a 4 credit hour class would be 12 hours. So I have a faculty member who has a little time clock in his course, and he kind of writes out specifically how much time it should take the student, like the approximate amount of time it should take that student. And that kind of helps in your mind to think about, because I've seen an overload. I'll have a faculty member come to me and say, hey, do you think this is too much for these students in this short amount of time? And oftentimes, if you think about how long it would take a novice to do these types of things, you kind of find that either it is too much or it isn't too much. Or maybe you're giving them a reading and a PowerPoint and there's really no deliverable and you don't ask them to really do anything at all except to listen and to read. and chances are maybe they won't. So maybe perhaps a good practice if you're interested in thinking about the amount of time that your students are spending on work is to kind of jot down in your mind. We don't necessarily have a work item that we can give to you for that, but one of the instructional designers can help you kind of create something to help you jot down how much time it's taking your students to complete these assignments, assessments, tasks, discussion boards, quizzes, etc., so that you are giving them the most for their buck, so to speak.
Could I just add something? When you're teaching face-to-face, you have a time commitment, at least with those 3 hours. So you can really transfer that to your online class.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the objective is that we give them that same experience, right? The misconception is that the face-to-face classes are going to be more difficult than the online classes, and it shouldn't be that way. So if you have them face-to-face for those hours and you're giving them specific assessments in that amount of time or discussions or whatever the case is, we can come together, you and an ID or one of the people in eLearning can sit together to migrate that over so that the experience is equivalent, because that's what we want. We want an enhanced or equivalent experience in the online setting. Another point, busy work, which is something that a lot of designers and a lot of researchers often see, worksheets, things just to fulfill the time requirement. And oftentimes there was a study, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. One of the studies said that students, don't like or don't necessarily appreciate just an overflow of content that doesn't necessarily speak directly to what you're asking them to do. So if we can think about some of the assignments that we have, how much of it is actually aligned with the objective of that particular unit. And I know that many of you have already done objectives with our center. And in that time, we kind of talk about, what is this for? Why are you asking them to do this? How does this align? How does it not? And most times you all have absolute alignment. But sometimes there are little videos or assessments that may be antiquated or just fall right outside of the lines that aren't necessarily necessary or appropriate for that specific unit. So that's something that we can consider when we're talking about pacing and time management for our students. Are all of these assignments or assessments necessary? And if they are, I need to make that apparent so that the student is aware. And that's the last piece. Sharing the purpose of instructional materials. It's not always an obvious thing. So I've seen, even in classes that I take, an instructor will give you something to read, and it's like, okay, what am I supposed to get from this? And that sometimes in an online class, I've seen several online classes, as I'm sure you can imagine, where there are just read, watch, take from that whatever you take. As opposed to an introduction of the material, this is take this away, consider this, think about this as you watch, because that's going to help the student as well save time, because they won't have to kind of decipher what it is you're trying to get them to understand in that time. So as we've switched to Canvas, it's become a little bit easier to kind of annotate the things that you want to give the students. So just a quick sentence or two about the major pieces of whatever that assignment or assessment is and what they should gather from it or perhaps consider when doing that assignment will definitely help with the pacing and the time management.
So I think the navigation is another piece that we see come up in the research a lot when they ask about student satisfaction. So we looked at a bunch of studies before doing this, and the student satisfaction studies talk about some other things that we're going to talk about, but definitely this. They don't want to be lost. Once they get lost, they get frustrated. When they're frustrated, they don't like the course. They all of a sudden have a negative aspect. And why is student satisfaction important? Because that's your spot reports, right? So we always want to make sure that the students are having a good experience out there. One of the things we can do for that is to make sure that the navigation is intuitive. That means there's a flow through the course where the student knows what to do next. You never want them to get to a point in your course where they're like, I'm not sure what's next, and they have to email you. They should know what's next, like Allyson said, read, watch, and then what? We need to know, and then what, after you do all of the, the content work. So does it flow from one page to the next? Does it have a next button? That's a good, sometimes we don't have it in a linear flow. We get some courses where, we get in there and we're like, I'm not sure where to start. So is there a place where it's very clear, this is the start of it? Do an intro video, let them know, here's what we're going to do. That will give you the clues for maybe looking at the content. We're going to do this because we want to talk about that. And that little piece, just a 3-minute little quickie video would start them off, and you can let them know what's next and what's next. Also, you should look at what they're seeing. So there's a student view, no matter what LMS you're on, there's a student view. Make sure you go to the student view and see what they're seeing, because we see on our side, on the course builder side or on the faculty side, we see something different. Things are open that won't be open for them sometimes. And it can be just as simple as, oh, I forgot to publish that discussion board, but it makes a big difference for the student on the other side, because they're lost then, right? If they don't see a discussion board, now they're frustrated again. There's an email. If it's the weekend, you might not see it. So you don't want those big gaps to go unnoticed. So make sure you look at the student side of that. And we like to say everything to be consistent throughout. There's no need to mix up what your modules look like from one week to the next, or however you break up your course. If the student has mastered how to work through module 1, they should not have to think about how to get through a module again. All the modules that follow should have the same navigation. We don't want them to think about the navigation, the technology, or anything about the structure of the course. We want them to be completely immersed in your content. So once they figure out how to do it, it should all be the same. Help them navigate through it like that.
I think with the switch from Blackboard to Canvas, students are going to kind of anticipate that there is going to be a learning curve, and it's hard to not have one of those. So with kind of a careful design, and it doesn't have to be something super time consuming, but just carefully going through after you've designed your course with an idea or by yourself, just going through to make sure that when you click something, it actually opens. And what you're actually looking for is there, reading through. There are several times where I've read through, like faculty or even myself, a course that I've taught, where I'll ask them to do something and that item is not there for them to access, or I don't have an example of what that looks like, or there's a website that I referenced and the website is broken. And that is absolutely gonna bother you on Sunday night when you're eating your dinner and they're gonna email you and you're gonna have to get up or whatever the case may be. So that forethought will really save a lot of time in the end, because if that navigation is seamless, the emails are minimized. And that really is, like Julie was saying, what we want to do. The LMS should really be an afterthought, if a thought at all. The learning management system, what they're using, Canvas or Blackboard, Desire to Learn, anything that they have, they shouldn't be necessarily worried about how to get through it, as opposed to they should be more concerned with what the assignment is, what it's calling for. It shouldn't be an impediment to learning. It should really just be a medium.
So the quality of the content, we talked a little bit about things being meaningful, right? But looking at your content and saying, is everything I have in here? Sometimes when we go from face-to-face to online, the content, we just think about, all right, put it all in there. And we don't take another look at it and say, now in this context, is this really the right thing to have? So making sure you take a scan of what you have in there. Are all the readings that you have in there necessary for the assignments that they're going to do? Are the videos still relevant? Are there discussion boards that you're going to do that are not backed up by what they have in their content now? So you really want to take another look at your content when you move to an online, or when you're revamping your course, and say, is all of this content the stuff that they really need? We've all taken courses before, and when there's a lot of reading, we start to kind of, triage, well, how much of this do I have to do? Everybody does that. So you don't want to give them this filler stuff. You want to give them what they need and not an overage of what they need, because it does get, voluminous in an online course. You wouldn't do that to them in a face-to-face context, but when they have, 7 chapters to read, that's going to be a toughie for them to get through. And so that's going to water down what they actually access. Make sure that the chapters that you give them, if there's only 3 pages in that chapter that are going to be relevant, let them know that and let them just scan the rest of it. And ask them, I think halfway through is a really great idea. Let them know that you care about how they're experiencing this course. Sometimes, you get through and the faculty don't ever ask. I've been through classes like this. It's like, we're all frustrated. We're all talking, as students, we're all talking about how frustrated we are. And we don't let the faculty member know that. And so ask, let them give you the feedback, because I think that can only improve.
Absolutely. That the second note here about the student feedback can be done of several ways. It can be done via email if you're not really into like the poll style things. You could use the tool that we did in the very beginning, like a poll everywhere, and just maybe ask 2 questions for clarity. You could use a Google form. You probably have all filled out some kind of survey via Google or SurveyMonkey or something like that. Or there are tools inside of Canvas itself if you don't want to go outside. You could make a 0-point quiz with just a few questions for like clarity, just to get your feedback. I think one of the benefits of spots is that you get to see how you're doing, but waiting until the spots come out is probably not the time to see how you're doing because it's over then, and those students don't get the benefit of you at your best since the class is over. So if you guys are interested in implementing something like that, that's a very easy thing that we can do. It could even be something as small as an announcement where you say, hey, you know, if you have some feedback for me, you can send that to me. I want to improve, or even on the frequently asked questions discussion board, if you have an open forum, you can ask them, what did you like about this? What did you dislike? Of course, you'll get some people saying too much work, but that's the nature of the game. So.
You'll know which ones are meaningful and which ones aren't.
Well, at the same way, I think it invalidates them. I think you're creating a real teacher presence. Obviously, it's like, well, she really does care because she's asking me what I think.
And if there's something that's confusing, perhaps there's navigation that you use that you think is spot on, that the students say, I never know where to find this, and you see that happen 3 times. It's like, oh, it's me. It's not them, it's me. So you can identify something very quickly, switch it up so that they see the course lives. It's not just some stagnant thing that you roll over from one semester to the next. This course is living and breathing. As you do well, I will keep it. As you stumble, I'll try to fix it so it doesn't happen again. And that enhances and influences teacher presence, which is something we'll get to after.
I think it's really empowering too to ask the students what Rosemary said is really true, to just say that you are a voice in this course and I do react to you. We don't want them to ever think that they're taking a course from the computer, right? There's a person behind this. There's a living person that actually does care about their experience. The organization and planning, we have some tools that we're going to share with you later, but we want you to think about, you know, how is your course planned out to begin with? Sometimes it's just the chapters in the book and that's how I'm going to go, but taking a look at that will, first of all, help your alignment with your assessments and the content that we've been talking about, but making sure that, you know, you planned it out with intentionality. So does it have a blueprint? We call it a blueprint here, just because it seems to me to be something that says what it is. You wouldn't go to Home Depot and buy a bunch of boards and nails and start hammering away to build a house. You'd have to draw it out first. You need to know where everything's going to go. And we think the same way about our courses. We have all of this material. We have tons of content. We have all of this knowledge that we want to impart to them that we've accumulated over the years in our brains. But how does that flow best? And so that's why we kind of structure it out first in what we call a blueprint. You also, this goes back to empowering them too. That FAQ discussion board will allow the students to ask their questions and answer each other's questions. And that's one of the best things I think about the FAQ that I like. I may not get to their questions until nighttime because I work a daytime job. Sometimes by the time I get there, 2 or 3 students have already answered the question. Absolutely.
So another piece is a course schedule, and it's probably a document you've seen us use several times or something that you already use because your department requires it. But this is a very good tool to make sure that you already know the end at the beginning. When students see that schedule, I think for most students, it's probably more useful, at least immediately, than the syllabus. Because the schedule is a document. It's a 1-pager we suggest, or 1 to 2 pages. You print it out, you can take it with you, you see what's due, you see what you have to read, or see that you have a reading, and then you can go from there. So the schedule is a major tool, and it also kind of forces you to get into what you're going to be doing. Like, what does my class look like? I need to design a roadmap, and a schedule is a very helpful tool to help you get there. Another piece, too, that we didn't necessarily touch on in the very beginning is timing of your modules. So some modules will last for a week. Some modules will last for 2 weeks. The schedule will help you to kind of think about how long each student will need on each of those assignments. So if you have one module that's really robust, it has a lot of information inside of it, then you say, you know what, I think this one should span maybe a week and a half or 2 weeks. Just as long as you're consistent maybe like it ends every Sunday at 11:59 or something like that. Consistency is key, but you also want to just be able to see, okay, I have 16 weeks. How am I going to break this down? When does this logically fit in? So that that scaffolding can actually happen inside of the class, and you're not just throwing assignments in because it's what you did face to face. The syllabus being up to date, that is very important because, like Julie said before, it really is your contract with your students. I knew someone who saw a syllabus and the professor said one thing on the syllabus one day, and then he changed his mind and released a different version without telling the students that he updated it. So the student did what was on the first version of the syllabus and then kind of held it against that professor in the end, like, hey, listen, I didn't know that you updated this. You didn't tell us. This is what I have, and this is all I'm doing, and this is all I'm held to. And there was really kind of like a little bit of contention going back and forth there because that syllabus was not immediately up to date. So if you have to, not that you can't, but if you have to update your syllabus, please make sure you let your students know. And if you can avoid making major changes to your syllabus, that would be, I think, an effective practice because it is your contract with your students, and making sure also the resources that the students need to use, like the accessibility office or what are the things, tech support, those links should be up to date in your syllabus. And we have a template that we'd be happy to share with you so that it is always up to date and always on par with university regulations and with your own policy. And then the last piece on this one is knowing the end at the beginning. So designing kind of a roadmap, like Julie said before, a blueprint. How does my class look at the end? What do my students have, or what are they equipped with at the end of this course? And that can look different ways. If you are more of a visual person and you like to see it as more of an infographic, it does design it that way. Brian, if you could push forward. This is one that I think all of you know, Judy. This is one that she did for our e-certification course. She is absolutely a visual person, and I think that it helps to, at a glance, give the students an idea of what they're going to be looking at for the course. And this is an infographic. It was created with a brainstorming tool that she likes to use. And it gives them the unit name, the amount of time, what they're going to have to basically do, kind of in short. And it just kind of goes through a logical progressive order. So this is another way to build out a course schedule, or if you don't want to do a full blueprint, you can make something that kind of accomplishes the same task with a different spin to it or a different look.
When there's something fun like this, I like to think of it maybe as a leaderboard that the students can use, or a gaming kind of way of looking at it. Because if I'm doing the course and I'm already here at Unit 4, visually I can be like, I am working halfway through. Only these 3 left, and they don't look that hard. I'm getting the rhythm of this course. So to me, it's kind of like you can sort of start checking off, where you are in the course and feeling better about the progress that you're making. The grade book is one thing to look at, but I think this is a little bit more fun for one thing, and it's a little bit more informative because you're getting the objectives where we're going with this course. So you can say, if you're still down here in assessment, but we are going to talk about teacher presence, but it's later on. We are going to talk about active learning, but it's down at the end. So if you have questions about that, you know where you're building to when you start out.
Absolutely. And if you need to make a change from one semester to the next, this quick at a glance, because it's so visual, you can say, well, you know what? And this is what we had to do for our eCert course that we all facilitate. We noticed that people were getting stuck on community and collaboration because it was all the way at the end. So we were able to very quickly see, okay, you know what? The group work is a hard piece to do all the way at the end. So let's jump that up to number 4 and move the syllabus to number 7 because that's an individual assignment that they can do. So you can at a glance see where your students perhaps got stuck in the last semester, or see something that doesn't necessarily work, quickly fix it and move on to the next thing. So if you are a visual person, this is a helpful, not this format, but having a kind of a picture of what your class looks like is perhaps a helpful tool if you're interested in that kind of thing.
We were talking about grading in our team meeting the other day, and to me this is a great way to look at that too. Some of us have like big papers due, and that's a lot of grading. And then if you have something right after that that's grading, grading heavy as well, you're gonna get bogged down. The students are gonna get frustrated that they're not getting their grades back fast enough. And I hate to give them a new assignment without letting them know how they did on the one previous. So for me, when I was redesigning a course that I just got from somebody else, I had to blueprint it out so that I could sort of pace my grading. Like I know that paper is going to be heavy, so I'm going to put that there. And these two are not going to be grading heavy for me. And then I can, jump in here. So I wanted to give the students that pace, but also myself, because it's a bad student experience if they're 3 units in and they still didn't get my feedback from number 1. I don't like to grade that way at all for them. They need to know how they're doing all the way along. So again, this is kind of a fun way to just sort of move it around on like the computer and see how it looks and move it back. So it kind of it's less confusing to me when I can just move it like that.
And the second option, or another option, is the blueprint. Go ahead. This you've seen probably over and over from our center. It's a product that we push very heavily, and it's really just the exact same thing that you just saw, just in a different format, so that you're able to see what goes with what. Okay, so this particular objective goes with course objective number 4. This particular assessment is in pair with unit objectives 1 through 4. So just to see how all of my objectives and all of my assessments work together for my students' well-being.
Has everybody seen this before? Yeah, you guys will like this now. Some people like the structure of the table and the fact that we can put all the numbers there, and other people are overwhelmed by that. And that's why we give a lot of different options of what to do. The one that preceded it is a little bit more maybe visually friendly than this one, but this one gives more information. So for us, we like this one because it shows us the alignment all the way across. When you go for quality matters certification or something like that, the first thing they're going to ask for is where's that alignment. So for us, this is sort of that, proof of alignment document that we have. Why did they watch this video? Well, because it relates to unit objective 1. And, it's going to relate to an assignment back here. Same thing with the PowerPoints. We talked about this earlier about why do you give this to them? This is the why for the students. It tells them exactly why they're doing any of the reading, why they're listening to the lectures, and exactly what it's going to relate to in terms of the assessments in it. So it just gives you a way to sort of organize and plan. And this is easy to change around as well. It's copy and paste. You just move it up and around when you're maybe trying to condense a course for the summer delivery or something like that. It gives you a nice way to look at what all do I have in my course. I don't want to lose any of my objectives, but they have to be now in 8 weeks or 6 weeks or something like that. And so it gives you a way to sort of organize that way.
Okay, so another piece that is important is a sense of community amongst students, with you included as the instructor. So I think that a helpful way to think about this, I know I've heard a lot of faculty say, my classrooms are very intimate. We have very good discussions in our classrooms. They're all very engaging, and my students really pay attention, and I don't want to lose that in the online section of the course. And that's a very real concern, and it's something that we continually work towards, building a sense of community in the classroom, because that's very important, especially in like social work classes or language building classes. We need to have the students engage with one another. So you can try to build in that sense of community by designing with components of active learning in mind. So if you're thinking about doing group work, I'm going to jump down just a little bit to synchronous sessions are not off limits. Now, I'm saying that if you have an online class, you shouldn't schedule face-to-face meetings because your course is online. But it's always a possibility. I know Rosemary does this, to have a synchronous meeting, like a virtual meeting, kind of like what we're having now, where you can talk to them, maybe discuss some major concepts, maybe have them dialogue back and forth. There are ways that you can break them up into groups, even in small virtual discussion boards, so that they maybe get to know each other. Perhaps I had an instructor that did one of her first weeks, she did a group meeting or a full course meeting, and they weren't necessarily able to all chime in and speak, but they at least got to hear her voice and see her face and kind of see her personality and kind of engage the students if they had questions and stuff like that. So that is a possibility. Also creating meaningful opportunities for interaction. So I really like that, and I know this is a language course, but Rosemary makes the students get online, and I think you have an expert that's going to be joining your students, or someone who speaks fluent French or something like that.
Yeah, I'm going to connect them with different people in business in the community.
Absolutely. So her course is about commercial French, is that right? Okay, so she's creating an opportunity for her students to get online with someone who speaks French and is in business, and they're gonna have dialogue with that person. And that's a wonderful opportunity for the students to really engage. It's not just, okay, let me get online and talk to my teacher. Not that that's a problem, but it is, I need to practice my language. I don't know anybody who is like around the street from me that can do that, but my instructor is creating an opportunity for me to engage and for me to make this happen. So I thought that was a really good idea. There was also another person who, the owner of the publisher, the author of the textbook happened to be a person who lived right in Boca. And so she sought him out and scheduled a virtual session for him to come online and talk to her students. Just another opportunity for them to get an expert's opinion, expert advice. It takes an hour maybe to schedule the meeting. You can have them click on a link. We'd be gladly willing to help you figure out how to do this. But it's just another opportunity for students to be able to engage with one another. And sometimes synchronistic learning.
Oh, is this the faculty workshop?
Yeah, come on in.
The one that started at 1?
12:15?
Nope, wrong one.
Okay.
So one of the things I was going to say about the active participation, to me, I can read stuff and answer the questions. If I do stuff, I'm more engaged in it, I'm going to remember it. And that's just my reality. I don't know if that's true for everybody, but if I actually participate in it, if I have spoken to someone, you know, in French, I'm going to remember it a lot better than me memorizing it. If I have something, you know, in a practical application in terms of actually doing something rather than reading it, I'm going to choose that every single time because I'm just going to remember my experiences. I'm a person that, you know, remembers experiences, and I attach meaning to emotion. So I need some sort of emotion to have happened in order for me to remember what's going on. And I think that's, you know, that we don't lose that when we come out of the classroom. We just have to look at it differently, a little bit of a different lens sometimes, but there are a lot of possibilities. Some of the folks that came to us that were teaching English, they were concerned because the experience that their students had in their classrooms was that they came in, there was a topic and they talked about it. They talked about a reading and all of that. And how is that going to happen asynchronously in an online class? And that was a concern for them. So it's different for them to have a journal as the way that those students interact with them. But to hear their feedback after it, it became a really deep experience for the students, so much so that the faculty members were saying, you know, I've never had to refer people out to counseling so much as I do now that I have this journal, because there's an intimacy that was so deep that they were connecting with the readings and they were talking about themselves in a way that, you know, was a little bit concerning and sometimes or just needed a little bit extra. So that doesn't happen in the classroom, you know, and that's something that, you know, if something happened to me that, you know, that was that profound in just reading something, I'm going to remember that reading forever. So, you know, I think that we have to sort of, you know, broaden our view of what it means to engage students and have them actively involved in what we're doing.
Another way to think about maybe doing group work, there was a person I spoke to at a conference once who suggested pairing students based on their strengths. So a lot of times we put people inside of groups kind of arbitrarily. We're like, all right, this person is with these other 4 people, and then we go. But she suggested, you know, you need someone who has a strong sense of organization, someone who's a very timely person, someone who is able to write well, and those types of things. And so she suggested, you know, if these people have an affinity towards one or another of these strengths, try pairing those people. You need a recorder, you need someone who's well-spoken, you need someone who does this. And it may not always happen like that, but that may be, if you have a small class, especially a way to kind of group your students so that you kind of have a really full and holistic group by the time you're finished with the pairing. So that's another way to try to create community in a classroom or establish opportunities for students to be able to engage with one another and your content and with yourself.
Yeah.
Okay, so grading and feedback on assignments. Julie mentioned that she has kind of a dislike for grading several assignments at a time and leaving them wondering, you know, what they did on the last one. You know, I'm on paper 4 and I'm still waiting on my feedback from paper 1. So setting up a time, this goes back to pacing and organization. if you have office hours, I would suggest scheduling a time during those office hours to really give them the feedback that you desire them to have, because this is a big piece of the online environment. The feedback, the announcements, this is where they get to see who you actually are. This is where your presence really is felt, is primarily in the feedback that you provide to students. If it's a writing course, this is a huge time for you to be able to express to them what they're doing wrong and what they're doing right. I know that I speak about this all the time because I really believe in it. It's a repository of responses where you give not generic responses, very specific responses, and you house those responses in kind of your own. I have a Google Drive that I house mine in. They're very detailed, very specific about APA, what's right, what's wrong, what you did, what you didn't do, what you should have done, and what you will do in the next time. And you keep that. You keep it, it's not name specific, but you can paste that into the students. And then you say, hey, Marjorie, this is what you need to know, blah, blah, blah. And you already have it written out. You can paste it in and it cuts down on grading significantly, but it doesn't take away from the depth of the response that you've given that student. So I think it's a powerful tool to use. It's one of the methods that I use and I really suggest to other people. And I've seen a few researchers talk about it, some good, some bad, but I like that method, at least if it's not becoming something that takes you away from actually reading the assignment. What are the learner expectations? Inside of your syllabus, there is a section that talks about how often you'll give them feedback. So if you know that you will turn their work around in a week, setting that expectation, if it's a realistic one, is a good idea. We ask, especially in Quality Matters, they say, what's the communication policy of the instructor? When are they going to be returning the responses to their students? That's something that students want to know. I'm sure that many of us have gotten emails like, hey, Mr. I submitted something a few days ago. When will you be getting that back to me? And that's a very important question that they probably should have an answer to before they even have to ask. So grading, feedback on assignments, this is a very powerful tool and it ranks very highly for students on what makes an effective online class.
Bottom line is they need these filled in because they want to know how they're doing in the class, right? So doing the grade book is one thing, but I think what Allyson was saying about the feedback is how we're telling them how to get better. So don't just take the fact that you got, what is that, 9 out of 10 here or 6 out of 10 here. Look at the feedback. We don't give it to them. They don't have any way to move forward. I just did what Allyson was talking about. I had a big paper due at the beginning of the class, like in the second unit, because I wanted them to grow throughout the rest of the class. And I gave them really deep feedback on writing structure. Just simple stuff, the thesis statement. It was all over the place with stuff like that. Paragraph structure and all that, because I knew they had a paper at the end that was going to be a high stakes paper and I wanted them to grow. So all of the feedback for most of them had to do with, this is what a thesis statement is, here are some links to help you with that, here's the link to the writing center, please go see them. All of those things, I didn't have to write that over and over and over again for 25 students. I wrote that once and then customized it for each of them and then looked at what was specific in their thing and gave them that feedback. And then I also did, there's a little thing, if you're in Canvas, you just click it and you can talk to them, right? So it's like the easiest way to give verbal feedback. So they got all of that feedback and then I just gave them like a quick 2-minute wrap up of, this was a great paper, your topic was awesome, but here's where I got lost. And so moving forward, use these resources. I'm looking forward to it, the next paper. And that gave them a little bit more about how they're doing than just the number, because the numbers were going to be bad.
Yeah.
And I knew that they were going to freak out. And I actually wrote my announcement, don't freak out. Because the papers they weren't going to be graded very well. But I think if they read all of the information and listened to my thing, they knew that we're going to get so much better by the end of this class that it won't matter what you got on this first paper because it's a low stakes paper.
That's good. Maybe it's a little bit off topic, but when it comes to feedback, I know that in Blackboard, I put the feedback right in the rubric, and there are kind of 2 places to put it. So I always make sure I put it in both places. But honestly, I'll tell you, I don't know exactly what that looks like to the learner. Is it real easy for them to access all the feedback in Canvas? Is that something that's
a really great question, actually, because it is once they know how to do it. So a great thing to do when you release the grades, I always put out an announcement, hey, you can see that I released the grades, and then give them the link to the little you know, the one-pager PDF that tells them how to go to look at their feedback. Because once you know how to do it, it's easy, but if you don't know how to do it, they'll say, all I got was a grade, you didn't tell me how I did.
And Canvas, I know this is not about Canvas, but Canvas has really good job aids. They have really good instructions online. Their communities have a lot of information. So if you Google how a student accesses feedback in Canvas, more than likely it'll pop right up like the first thing. So if you ever have a question, not that you shouldn't come to us, but if you ever have a question and you have Google handy, type in the question inside of Google will give you a lot of information. Sometimes that will prevent you from having to come and see us. That's happening.
Come and see us anyway.
Yeah. Come and see us anyway. Right. I think this is the final piece here, but a very big piece. This ranks very highly on most of the studies, less on the student side, but more on the quality assurance side. Teacher presence. The teacher is the only thing that separates a course, perhaps a good course, so to speak, from a bad course. And those are very subjective terms. But when we think about teacher presence, it's how often are you releasing your announcements? So sometimes, of course, you can automate your announcements, and that's a wonderful tool to use to have them released every week. But oftentimes you want to update them on something. Maybe a film is being released that is specifically related to your course content, and you throw something in there in the discussion board or in the announcement section about this film, and maybe you'll offer extra credit for them to go and see that so that they can see, hey, my instructor's online. Let me hit her up really quickly. Let me ask her a question very quickly. If there's a glitch, does she fix it immediately, or does it take 14 days for her to get back to me? The students immediately know if the course is on autopilot or not. They can sniff it out. If an instructor is not there, they can see it, but it shouldn't take all of your time. If you dedicate perhaps an hour a day to just, or maybe 30 minutes, because if you do it frequently, you will have less things to do. So maybe 30 minutes a day just to check to make sure, you know, this is working fine, this is working well, the discussion board doesn't have any unanswered questions, my grade book is up to date. Just a little bit of time every weekday can kind of save you a lot of time and help your spots. Engagement and interaction, instructor conveyance of personality. I think this is a big one, the third one. What does your introduction say? So the Quality Matters rubric that we use suggests that the introduction of the instructor be very personable and relatable. That is kind of a debatable thing because some people like to keep a very business, very professional persona, and some people are like, hey, you know, what's up? My name is such and such, and let's be friends. So it just depends on your own personality, but designing your course with your personality in mind is a wonderful way to go. If you're not a super formal person, sending announcements that convey your personality are awesome, or designing or adding videos that convey who you are, like little funny videos, I think are awesome. And showing the student who you are so that they know how to communicate with you. It's often also a good practice to tell them in your introduction what to call you and how to talk to you. If you prefer hello, Dr. such and such, make sure you make that known. If you say that they can call you Nancy, make that known as well, because often, especially when you're dealing with undergraduates, sometimes they just don't know. They'll just call you Miss or hey.
Or nothing at all.
Or nothing, and you'll just get a no salutation, just, can I turn this in late? What are you talking? Lastly, virtual office hours. It's not something that you have to hold based on our standards. I don't know if your department has specific specifications about that, but virtual office hours, letting your students know when you will be online synchronously is a good idea so that they can chat with you and ask you a question. Maybe they want to schedule a meeting with you. So releasing that information, hey, I'll be online Mondays from 3 to 5. Maybe you're at home cooking dinner or something like that, and you're not really sitting at the computer, but if a chat pops up, you're able to answer that. That is helpful so that they know every week if I need to have a conversation with him or her, I can do this at this time without interfering with their personal schedule. I can save an email and just ask them the question that I have or him the question that I have. So these are pieces. Of course, there's a lot that goes into instructor presence, and much of it comes before the class ever begins, the designing process. But there's a lot that happens during the course that is the difference between a course that is on autopilot versus a course that really is engaging. And it doesn't have to take a lot of your time every week. I think that that's the big piece to walk away with.
And I'll tell you, I scanned, I think the top 4 studies that came up when I did a search right before this, And in each one of them, teacher presence was the best predictor of student satisfaction. Each one of them came up with that. So that's really what the students are looking for, and that's what they're happiest with if it's present in the class. And as Allyson said, it's not that hard to do, especially if you start, with your blueprint or with some sort of schematic that helps you to plan that out in it. So,
oh, okay, this is the last one. So finally, and we have about 5-10 minutes left, technology as a tool, not the teacher. This kind of goes in tandem with the last thing we talked about, teacher presence. Consider your use of technology. Is it enhancing your students' experience, or is it confounding them? Are your students confused by what you're asking them to do? If you have a specific software that you are in love with. I had a professor, she's my mentor, she had this new thing. She's like, I need you to get on Trello. I need you to get on Trello. And I'm like, Trello is confusing. I don't want to get on that. I just want to be on Google Docs. It was confusing me and I didn't want to deal with it. Now, granted, it wasn't a graded assignment, but consider this being your students having to access a software that is for a grade that really is not easily navigable and that is confusing, or you have them have to download several plugins and several different things so they can access this specific technology. If it takes too much of your time, chances are it may take too much of theirs, and it perhaps should be something that you think are maybe a face-to-face, or maybe you extend it and find a simpler medium to be able to do what you need to do. There usually is always a simpler way. So if you're thinking about using a specific tool, we can help you with getting the directions so that your students don't have to think too hard about what to download, how to access, when to access, what to do once they're in there. It's just an easy kind of seamless thing. And we see this happen a lot with like publisher materials. They try to make this very seamless. So you click a button and you can get in. And if the students are usually in the first week, they're like, Miss, how do I do this? So what's the passcode for this? So those instructions are really good up front. And there are a lot of job aids that have been developed because of that kind of barrage of emails that happen.
And quality matters, we've talked about that a couple of times. That's one of the things that is a must-have for them. If you're going to use a piece of technology, you have to have the instructions for it, right? So we just have, a little picture of how to click the button for something so that they know where it is, or just instructions for, in order to go to this, you're going to want to go here and then here and then here. Give them the links. Don't, again, back to what we said before, don't let them spend all of their time doing technology stuff. You want them to do your subject matter stuff. So if you make it as easy as possible and try it out with a few people. If two of your colleagues can't do it in 15 minutes, you probably don't want to use that, unless it's something that's relevant to your field and they have to know how to do it. But I wouldn't bog them down with technology that just because it's cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is kind of loaded and I'm going to simplify it just a little bit. So in 2009, over 2,300 students were responded to a survey that was collected from 31 institutions in 22 states. And according to the students' perspective, and these kind of overlap with what we already have, their top 5 really have to deal with clarity and ease of navigation. So the top 5 pieces that make a easily navigable course or a good online course, and there were 30 things on the list. The top 5, clear instructions. How do I get started? How do I find course components? So we're talking about that easy navigation. Criteria for how worker participation will be evaluated. So that is that objective kind of grading. If you're leaving feedback, using a rubric is going to be helpful there. So that's helpful. The grading policy is stated clearly. What are you looking for? When are you going to give me my information back? And what is this course based out of? Is it 100? Is it 100 points? Is it 500 points? How am I being graded, and how do I calculate my grade at any given point in this course? That's a very important one. Technologies are provided and easily downloadable. So if you want me to use something, how do I get it? End of story. And number 5, assessments are appropriately timed with the length of the course varied and appropriate to the content. So quality stuff, not just take this quiz, multiple choice here, multiple choice there, blah, 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 we're done. Quality content. So it would seem, I would think, from the student's perspective, I'm thinking, when I'm a student, all I want to know is just the hard, fast stuff. But they're really concerned about quality as well, right? Just like we are. Perhaps they want more objective kind of ideas like rubrics and stuff like that. But that is in tandem with the faculty's state of mind. We want the students to know what they're getting into, and how to be successful in the course.
So we have a couple of minutes left for input from you guys. What are your thoughts about this? Do you have any strategies that we haven't brought up during this? And the folks from online, let Brian know that you want us to open up your mics, and we'd be glad to hear from you too. Things that make your course more student-friendly, more navigable.
I think we have another, is there another poll, Brian? Yeah, there is. So while you guys are thinking about that, there was one last question. If you find that your current course is lacking in some of the essentials, how can we course correct kind of midway? So we're in, what is this, fall? We're like 8 weeks into fall. And if there are pieces of your course that you find are a little bit out of whack, how do we course correct in this short period of time? If there is that something that you think is easy? Do you need assistance? How does that happen?
And you can use your poll everywhere for that.
It's on the poll. Yeah, can you flip over, Brian? We can talk about it verbally instead of on the computer, but so if you guys want to share what you were typing, I can kind of write out here. I believe this will work. Yeah. Anybody?
You can make an announcement.
Yep.
With this change. Maybe an assignment or assessment.
Yeah.
If when I have, I'll have to make changes in our calendars with the storm, I keep the original calendar, and I strike things out, and then I move them around so they can see where the change is more visible. Oh, I thought that was due. Oh, well, that's why I thought that was due. I don't know if that's a good idea or not, but I tend to do it that way.
No, it's a good idea. I like that idea a lot. The calendar tool is an amazing tool for messaging out things like that too. Because I set mine so that I get alerts on my phone, which I live by.
Yeah, me too. Anybody else?
Any other thoughts?
Online?
Publisher information, like technical.
Yeah.
So Julie posed a question before asking if you guys have any tricks in your bag that you can share with us that help to enhance your students' experience. You guys are in the field, you're doing it today. You know what the students are saying, what they aren't saying, what they're maybe posting on your discussion boards or emailing you about. But it's been helpful in you navigating your course, or at least setting up your course.
You know what? Using the resources at hand is a great one. Yeah.
I'll keep it too.
Asking questions is great.
Really working together, it's good to be able to brainstorm.
Yeah. And so whether that's with colleagues or whether there's great that you can come to on campus, sometimes you become the resource for the rest of the people in your department, right? Now that you know everything. But community is amazing. That's why we do these things too. We always want to share what the community is doing, because as you go through courses, you come up with quick fixes, right? And sort of changing up on the fly, and we want to make sure that we share that out to everybody.
Anyone else?
Sorry.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
So I wanted to share what happened in one of my courses about 2 weeks ago. We had an assignment that wasn't behaving the way it was supposed to be. So students were emailing the professor, and then she said, write your questions on the frequently asked questions, the Q&A forum, so that everybody can benefit at once from whatever I decide to do or whatever we come up with collectively. So as a timely method for communicating something that is on the go, I thought that was really well done.
That's great. That's a great.
Using the FAQ discussion board to kind of compare the grievance, so to speak.
Yeah.
Give you the
Yeah.
Yep. Perfect.
Okay, you guys, so we are right at 1:15, and pesky. Can you clear or should I?
All right. So thanks for being here. Thanks for being here virtually. We love that we have folks that come in the room and folks that are sitting at home or sitting in their office doing this kind of thing, kind of our lunch and learn. We have some other ones coming up. We have, we're just doing the course migration here in this room on Friday, but next Monday we're doing active learning involving students in the doing and thinking about what they're doing. So that's going to be a great one. It's a little bit of a jump off point from what we talked about today. So how do we kind of deep dive into that active learning piece? So we hope that you will join us for that. And thank you for joining us for this.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.